late last year is an issue that refuses to die. There's continuing concern that the integrity of the electoral rolls has been corrupted, and even suspicion that some close contests in state and federal elections going back over 14 years may have been swung by bogus votes. Among the recommendations the federal government is said to be considering is requiring voters to show ID when they enrol, a recommendation arising from claims that fake voters enrolled at vacant blocks or in fast food car parks. In one case, the voter roll for one especially suspect federal election never even saw the light of day. Here again is Ross Coulthart.
Australians are often assured they have one of the best election systems anywhere. Our expertise in preparing and running elections is exported to fledgling democracies around the world. So why is there a new push-on from the coalition government for major reform to combat electoral corruption before this year's federal election?
There are a lot of people out there who have been involved in electoral fraud for the purposes of pre-selection or elections who are too terrified to come forward and talk about it.
The push puts the government squarely at odds with the Labor Party, most of the state governments and the Electoral Commission, which flatly denies there is any election corruption problem at all.
The AEC is willing to assert once again that there is no evidence that any federal election since the establishment of the AEC in 1984 has been subjected to any widespread and organised conspiracy that would have affected the results of those federal elections.
As you'll see today, the government looks set to reject these assurances and defy objections from the Labor states. It's seriously considering plans to press ahead with electoral reforms that would require people to show identification before they can enrol to vote.
The Commonwealth should go it alone if the states refuse to agree.
And there's Democrat support for at least one of the reforms many in government want introduced. A call for one vote, one value to be written into every political party's constitution. The change would give every party member an equal say in selecting candidates, unlike the present system where the unions have disproportionate influence on pre-selections in the Labor Party. It's a politically dynamite change for the ALP, which sees it as squarely aimed at crushing the power of the trade unions.
Well, I think any such interference in any Australian political party would be utterly preposterous. I mean, this just wouldn't go to having an impact on trade union affiliations to the Labor Party. This would cut across all political parties in a whole range of areas.
Last year, the ALP was rocked by revelations from the Queensland Government's Shepparton inquiry. Party members admitted fraudulent enrolments on the electoral roll, a rort that was allegedly approved and encouraged by senior Queensland Labor figures. It went right to the top of the government. The then Deputy Premier Jim Elder stepped down, admitting electoral fraud. Joan Budd, the former General Returning Officer of the Queensland ALP, admitted falsely enrolling members of her own family. It all began when Townsville-based party member Karen Ehrman was jailed last year after she admitted being a bit player within an established system of electoral fraud in a well-known scheme carried out by the Australian Workers' Union faction within the ALP.
You're dealing with a foreign body, an outside body, having disproportionate influence over the affairs of a political party, greater than the members themselves enjoy. Now, it's quite apparent that in the inquiry in Queensland, it is that disproportionate influence which caused so many of the problems.
It was actually encouraging the fraud.
Yes, indirectly, and perhaps directly, but certainly indirectly.
Who's next, please? Who's next, please?
The right to vote in a fair election is a fundamental tenet of our democracy.
Sorry, what was the rest?
Despite what the Electoral Commission says, there are many on the coalition side of politics who have long held strong suspicions that the integrity of our voting system has been corrupted.
There is a culture that whatever it takes is okay, And if you get away with it in terms of your own local branch activities and advancement within the party, and you see that that is rewarded, well, there's not much of a step to decide to vote in a general election as well.
Senator Faulkner?
Much of the finger-pointing is at the Australian Labor Party. Senator John Faulkner has been an opposition member of a Senate committee investigating the integrity of the electoral roll since late last year. He asserts it's all a coalition witch hunt.
We don't have elections rorted in this country. Our system is outstanding. It is the best electoral system in the world, and it is free of fraud.
The line from the Labor Party was that the electoral frauds revealed in Queensland last year weren't for the purpose of rorting general elections, but for voting and pre-selection ballots to pick Labor candidates in state and federal elections. And that's what the Shepardson inquiry generally found.
There was, of course, exposed in Queensland a situation where, for internal political party advantage, in this case the Labor Party, and of course that's nothing for me to be proud of, I'm ashamed of that. In this case, in the Labor Party, people were trying to seek advantage within the party and electoral rorting took place. I'm pleased they were caught and I'm pleased they've been dealt with.
But the Shepardson inquiry did in fact hear several tantalising leads from witnesses, including Karen Ehrman, of possible voting fraud. She told of how she was asked by another party insider, Lee Birmingham, but refused to witness voter enrolment forms that were clearly planned to be used for voting at an election. Shepardson also made this crucial observation in his report.
I do not consider that the small numbers of persons who engaged in this practice should necessarily lead the Electoral Commission to believe that such conduct is relatively uncommon. Such conduct is in fact a form of political cheating. These unlawfully cast votes can prove decisive in polls where the margin between winning or losing is small.
Can I ask, has the AEC, have you ever caught any multiple voters?
Late last year, the Queensland revelations and more allegations about voting rorts in the seat of Fisher in 1987 spurred the Prime Minister, John Howard, to instigate a parliamentary inquiry into a host of claims about the integrity of the electoral roll. After months of hearings, its chairman, Chris Pine, admits the inquiry's uncovered no hard evidence that elections have been swung with fraudulent votes.
But quite frankly, it's a very short hop, skip and a jump from electoral enrolment fraud for the purposes of pre-selections to doing it for the purposes of election outcomes. And don't forget that in the seats where it has been proven to have occurred and people have been jailed for it, were seats that were won and lost by 50 or less votes.
Tomorrow, the report of the Electoral Matters Committee will be tabled in Parliament. Until then, no one's commenting on what it's recommending, but there's a clear view inside the government that now is the time for major reform.
It's easier for you and I to enrol to vote than it is to go and join a local video store. We need to give more proof of evidence that we are who we say we are when we want to take out a video than we do if we wanted to go and enrol to vote.
I think it's critical that the federal government introduce enrolment ID before the federal election and clean up our electoral roll as fast as we can before we vote again.